Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues and fellow representatives at the House of the People, one of the most admirable traits of Filipinos is the way we show our gratitude, sense of gratitude, or utang na loob, as we say in our native tongue. In such appreciation and gratitude, we project in so many ways and for so many reasons. In the Lone District of General Santos City, the 25th edition of the Tuna Festival is ongoing as I speak. Or more accurately, it ended yesterday, September 5, being the culmination of the Tuna Festival. This is our unique way of showing gratitude for the bounty of the seas that gives our city the distinct socio-economic and political advantage. This annual festivity comes on the heels of the 23rd National Tuna Congress, the only convention of its kind in the Philippines, held from August 31st to September 1. Unless I forget, our sincerest gratitude and appreciation to Senator Cynthia Villar, who honored us with her presence as our special guest during the closing rites of the National Tuna Congress, and Senator Jinggoy Estrada during the equally important opening ceremonies of the Tuna Festival. And for all the success in the conduct of the festival activities, a congratulatory greetings is imperative to our hardworking and dedicated Mayor Lorely Pacquiao, who was at the forefront of all the Tuna Festival activities. Adapting strategies responsive to global changes is the Tuna Congress theme this year, signifying the Philippine tuna industry's unified determination to proactively respond and aggressively push the industry's agenda amid the challenges of an ever-changing global economic order post-pandemic. We have much to be thankful to the Surgeon Federation of Fishing and Allied Industries Incorporated, or SAFI. By the way, Surgeon is an acronym of South Cotabato, Sultan Kudarat, Sarangani, and General Santos. This is the umbrella organization of 8 organizations involved in fishing, canning, fish processing, aquaculture production and processing, and allied industries, for their unrelentless pursuit of a policy environment that provides our fishing industry the competitive advantage, sustain gains, and ensure the livelihood of many who depend on fishing for their subsistence. In order for this representation to briefly expound on the concerns specific to the tuna industry and the fishing sector in general, allow me to acknowledge first the kindness of the European Union for the inclusion of the Philippines to the list of countries which have benefited under the Generalized System of Preference Plus, or GSP Plus, since 2014. A status that enabled our economy to immensely benefit from the enjoyment of trade preferences enhanced by zero tariff treatment on 6,274 products, or 66% of all EU taxable imported items, which include, among others, crude coconut oil, vacuum cleaners, electrothermic hairdressing apparatus, and prepared or preserved tuna products. By virtue of GSP Plus, Philippine exports over the years increased significantly according to the Department of Trade and Industry at 7.96%, that is from $8.06 million in 2021 to $8.70 million in 2022. To capitalize further on this status, we are made aware that GSP Plus allows the non-imposition of tariffs on fishery products and fish captured outside Philippine territorial waters as long as these are caught by Philippine flag vessels. We call this GSP Plus Rules of Origin. It is for this reason as well that there is a great need to explore whether there is none, or strengthen existing bilateral or multilateral trade agreements to allow Philippine flag vessel access to fishing grounds of other sovereign states specifically for catching highly migratory fish such as tuna, because tuna products remain the top fish export commodity with a collective volume of 91,754 metric tons, valued at $378.71 million US dollars. While we are on the subject of multilateral agreements with other countries, let us be aware that there is no agency of government exclusively tasked to monitor and report apprehensions and facilitate the release of fishermen apprehended and charged accordingly for violations of fishing laws in the high seas or in waters under the jurisdiction of other countries or disputed waters. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, since 2014, the Indonesian Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, Indonesian Navy and Marine Police have sunk close to 500 fishing vessels and close to 700 Filipinos repatriated from Indonesia, Malaysia, and many of those charged with illegal entry and illegal fishing. Time and again, we are made aware by the news reports of Filipinos apprehended in the high seas and left languishing in detention in Indonesia, Malaysia, and China, largely unaccounted for unless and until they are reported by the country where they were caught. The delays in the repatriation of these Filipinos more often than not have been generally attributed to the lack of appropriate government protocol, the long process of identification, and issues on funding. As signatories to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, or UNCLOS, where it is provided that the arrested vessels and crew shall be promptly released upon the posting of reasonable bond or security, and such other provisions that ensure the protection of the vessel and its crew, Asian-led initiatives and mechanisms to address the challenges of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing are being called to play to maintain and strengthen regional cooperation, promote mutual trust and understanding in maritime security and safety. On the part of the Philippines, there is need to establish standard operating procedures to be jointly administered by the DFA, Philippine Navy, Philippine Coast Guard, and the DABFAR as the appropriate response to these initiatives to protect and ensure the safety and well-being of our fellow Filipinos, whose only fault is to go after fish disregarding potential threats existing, because without any doubt, the situation in the West Philippine Sea has become even more complex. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of this august chamber, while this representation fully understands the creation of the Department of Migrant Workers by virtue of the need for a single government agency to look after the needs of our OFWs, numbering in the millions, and in gratitude and appreciation for their huge contributions to the economy in the form of remittances, and while we equally understand the creation of the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, the Department of Information Communications Technology, and so forth and so on, isn't it time that we pursue the creation of the Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, separate, distinct, and independent from the Department of Agriculture? We have the longest coastline of any nation in the world, around 36,289 kilometers and 7,107 islands within a territorial sea of close to 171 million hectares. We are number 13 among the ranks of the top fish-producing countries in 2020, and fishing provides approximately 4% of the entire labor force. The implications of these figures and the international treaties and agreements that our country has entered into involving everything and anything about fishing are already sufficient explanation to warrant the elevation of fisheries and aquatic resources from the bureau level to a department level. Any more delays may result to a situation where an even laws that this honorable chamber belabored to pass were left to chance, arising from the organizational weaknesses that BFAR finds itself with for the longest time. To further explain, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, consider Republic Act number 9379, otherwise known as the Handline Fishing Law of 2007, enacted on March 8, 2007, of which mandates the issuance of the Act's implementing rules and regulations within 90 days. Unfortunately, and to the disadvantage of the handline tuna fishing sector, the IRR was issued by the DAB-FAR on May 23, 2016, or 9 years after the law was passed, Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, and not 90 days. We have the National Tuna Industry Council, created by Special Order number 659, dated November 6, 2000, issued by the late Senator Edgardo Angara, then Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, the composition of which needs to be reconstituted as endorsed by the Philippine Council for Agriculture and Fisheries on August 11, 2023, when such reconstitution to include more stakeholders was recommended by the West Pacific East Asia Oceanic Fisheries Management Project since 2012. In 2018, a National Tuna Management Plan was established by BFAR to serve as a platform to provide tuna industry players with clear directions for a competitive and sustainable tuna sector. As of this year, of the 190 activities laid down in the management plan, 36% are not yet implemented, while 29% are partially implemented after 4 years. Post-pandemic prices of bunker fuel, diesel fuel oil, and liquidated petroleum gas certainly shows that the excise tax adjustment in 3 phases from 2018 to 2020 has already been applied by virtue of Republic Act 10963, otherwise known as the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion. An additional burden to both commercial fishing operations and small-scale fishing, because by and large, these expenses account for approximately 60 to 70% of the average operations cost. Section 43 of RA 10963 provides for the suspension of the imposition of the excise tax when fuel prices become prohibitive, and the fishing industry in developing countries such as ours are most vulnerable to rising fuel prices, since fuel is a significant input cost to operations at all scales of output. And Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, value-added tax, or VAT, as anybody would understand, is essentially a tax on consumption and is levied on the sales of goods and services at each stage of production and distribution process, borne by the final consumers of the battable goods. For this particular sector, now subject of this discourse, most inputs for fishing and related fishing activities are battable. However, fish sales are VAT exempted and considered non-battable sales. Thus, all VAT expenses incurred from production and distribution inputs are added expenses to the operator, manufacturer, proprietor, or fishing companies, a burden that becomes untenable when fuel prices are prohibitive. This particular situation that we have to live with in the Lone District of General Santos is not unique, because for many of the districts that we respectively represent, fishing and aquaculture are economic activities that are present in one way or another, in whatever form, manner, and scale. Fish is a food commodity, as basic as rice for many Filipinos, while the seas and oceans within our territorial jurisdiction and exclusive economic zones are open to all, even to those who are willing to risk life and limbs in order to feed their families. The very least the state can do is to ensure that their needs to sustain their livelihood are given the most preferential attention and not ignored nor delayed. Fishing is a primary source of livelihood, and fish is a vital resource for many Filipinos, whose very survival depends on the trade, merchandise, selling, processing, distribution, and so forth. Not to mention other allied businesses, such as boat and shipbuilding, supply of fishing equipment, provisions of food for the crew, and many more, which are directly or indirectly linked to fishing regardless of size or scale. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, the Philippine fisheries sector provides 1.6 million jobs, including subsistence fishing by low-income families, 1.3% contribution to the country's GDP, and 12.7% of the gross value added in agriculture, hunting, forestry, and fishing valued at 248.47 billion pesos. These significant contributions are worth considering because while most of the major economic and service sectors of the country are now under the jurisdiction of the respective government agencies at the department level, the Philippine fisheries sector remains to be under the jurisdiction of an agency at a bureau level. The Philippines is also party to various international management bodies on fishing, a fact which makes it incumbent all the more upon us to show that the country seriously adheres to the principle of sustainable fisheries through the planning and implementation of an effective and efficient fishery management plan. In true Filipino fashion, let us show our gratitude to the millions of our countrymen we call mga kababayan nating mangingisda o mandaragat, who sailed the ocean in bangkas to fishing fleets, leaving the comfort of their homes to harvest the bounty of the seas. Today, more than ever, their concerns require our undivided attention so that at the end of the day, we can genuinely say, maraming salamat, kabayan. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, thank you for your kind attention and a pleasant good afternoon to all. Thank you.